Not one of Boris Johnson's better days yesterday. His handling of the COVID crisis slammed by his one-time closest advisor in an explosive day of evidence that saw the Cabinet Office described as, and I quote, a dumpster of fire. And let me tell you, that's amongst many things that we cannot repeat on breakfast television.
No, and we're joined now by the Deputy Prime Minister, Oliver Dowden. You were a Cabinet Minister during Johnson's time in office. Was the government as incompetent as Cummings describes and as callous as some of the diary entries indicate? Do you recognise this?
Well, good morning from Bletchley Park, where we're about to host a historic AI summit. So I hope we'll get on to talking about that a little bit later.
We will.
In terms of this, in terms of this inquiry, it is doing, as uncomfortable as it is, exactly what it was set up to do. We set up this inquiry to get to the bottom of a historic crisis, not just in the United Kingdom, but around the world. And as part of that, we're hearing from everyone involved in it. And indeed, I gave my own evidence a few weeks ago, both orally and in written form. You heard evidence yesterday from Dominic Cummings, a former senior advisor to the Prime Minister. The former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, will be giving his evidence. The current Prime Minister will be giving his evidence. I certainly didn't recognise many of the things that Dom Cummings said yesterday, but that's the purpose of the inquiry, to hear those different bits of evidence and to get to the truth and the bottom of what happened. And when they produce their report under the excellent Judge Lady Justice Hallett, the government will respond in full to their conclusions.
What allowances do you think should be made for hindsight being a wonderful thing, given that this was an unprecedented crisis?
Well, that's one of the things that I actually raised in the evidence that I gave to the inquiry. I think Lady Justice Hallett has reassured people that they will take account of that. And of course, in any set of very intense decisions, people can go back over them with the benefit of hindsight and be able to reach different conclusions. I think I trust this inquiry to take all of the evidence and to analyse what's relevant, what's not relevant, how it impacted on the final decisions, and crucially, make recommendations about how we do things differently in future. And that's precisely the assurance I gave to the inquiry when I gave evidence, that we would learn the lessons.
Some people have been very shocked by the language that's used. I would ask you if you recognise that in a moment. And others have been horrified by the tone. Boris Johnson is quoted, he will give his own evidence, but he's quoted by a senior scientific advisor, Patrick Vallance, famous person that we've all come to know throughout this, as saying that, suggesting and discussing that COVID was nature's way of dealing with old people. Do you understand the horror of those who've lost older members of their family at this? Do you recognise that thought process from your time in the government then?
Well, of course, first of all, Kate, I understand people's deep hurt at some of these allegations that are being made. What I would say is this is precisely why we set up the inquiry in the first place. It's right that victims should understand exactly what happened. And we've given unprecedented access. In my time in government,
I don't want to interrupt you, but you knew him, you backed him.
That's why we've given over 55,000 pieces of evidence.
In Boris Johnson, you made a very good point that, you know, this is an ongoing inquiry. I totally take that. But do you recognise that thought process and that way of expressing in the person you backed for Prime Minister? And do you recognise and understand why people are horrified by it?
I understand and recognise people's concerns in the way that I just described as you slightly interrupted me, Kate. But I don't recognise it, and indeed it doesn't accord with the evidence that I gave, and I'm sure that the evidence that the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson will give will set out his account of what happened. I would just caution about taking one person's evidence, as significant as he was in terms of decisions that were made by the then government. It needs to be taken in the context of all the other evidence, and that's why we've set up this inquiry, to work out what really happened, and we're giving them all the information they need, and I will trust the conclusions of this inquiry.
All right, let's move on to the conference, which is about to start again behind you in Bletchley Park. Should we be frightened by AI, by artificial intelligence? There are so many radical, almost rumours abroad now about what's in store for us with AI, hence this conference. Should we be frightened by it?
No, I don't think people should be frightened. I think there are huge opportunities. In my entire time in politics, I've never seen such a potentially transformative technology. It's going to have huge opportunities for humanity and for this country, whether it's in relation to medicine, jobs being created, transforming our lives. But in order to be able to utilise those opportunities, to make the most of it, we've got to reassure ourselves against the risks. And that's what today's summit is about. It's about bringing together those higher-end AI companies, so-called frontier AI companies that are doing the development of that really emergent technology with national governments and indeed with our own intelligence capabilities and public service representatives to understand what those risks are, to get that common understanding and seek the process of mitigating against those risks so people can use AI with confidence and be reassured that governments are managing those risks alongside companies.
Well, the biggest risk that most people are frightened by, and there is some fear out there, is that AI will, sooner rather than later, take charge of itself and simply brush us aside, us humans aside, and take charge.
Well, you're talking about the so-called agentic AI. That's AI that develops a capability to act on its own. Now, to be very clear to your viewers, we are not at that stage now, but it is a possibility that has been raised. We need to take that very seriously, and we need to understand what the indicators are that we might be on that path and the steps to make sure that AI does what previous technologies have done that have benefited us so much. They help us enhance our capabilities. Go right back to the invention of the bicycle. You know, that enables humans to take their own energy and move faster. If we get AI right, it'll help us to do all the things we already do, like cancer research, or about helping the biggest challenges we face, climate change and so on, and enhance our capability. But AI has to be a tool that serves us, and this is what a part of this conference is about, making sure we understand where those risks lie and working together as an international community to address those risks.
It's a fascinating conference, Mr. Dowden. Really good to speak to you this morning. I'm sure there's a joke in there about AI deputy prime ministers and prime ministers, but I won't make it because it's too important. But good to talk to you this morning.
And of course,
I hope I won't be replaced by AI for a while yet. Thanks very much.
You've probably got about 10 minutes. OK, and of course, you've got Elon Musk arriving on Thursday, the world's richest man. He'll be in head-to-head conversation with the Prime Minister. That will be fascinating.